It's a new day on Deep Space Nine, and an unpleasant one for Kira. That's because she's not going to be on it soon, having agreed to visit the Cardigans to share intelligence, and that means a series of vaccinations. The Cardigans are currently struggling with some medical issues due to the ongoing Klingon aggression, so Kira needs to be dosed up for all eventualities. Bashir's potions aren't the only thing causing her nausea either, as she discovers her escort will be Seagull Dukat. He's now the captain of a lowly freighter, you see, his fall from grace caused by accepting the half-Bajoran daughter he fathered during the occupation. Clearly, the new Detopper Council couldn't have him as their military advisor after the scandal of his whole family rejecting him, though he considers the matter just a temporary bump in his career and plans to recover. Speaking of his daughter, Zial is on the ship too. Cardassia was less than welcoming to her, but Dukat was the opposite. He didn't hide who she was or fear being seen publicly with her, and now he's unofficially banished by being stuck on a freighter, she's here with him. Not that it's changed his attitude, it seems, which is why an alarm precedes a combat drill, or maybe kabooming rocks and shouting at people makes him feel a bit better about things. That might be why he snaps at Kira when she suggests an improvement he can't do due to lack of equipment, though he may also have done that purely so he could apologize and invite her to dine with him. He's the captain after all, and she's a guest, so it's only right. The meal starts out well enough. They speak of Zial and how Seagull Dukat's glad Kira stopped him from murderizing her. The cost, he thinks, was worth it. Their conversation goes downhill from that point, with Dukat first trying to imply he's her type, and then suggests Shakar has a long and storied history with other women from their resistance cell. Kira's not buying the shit he's selling, so it's just as well they're interrupted by another alarm, and this one is not a drill. Up on the bridge, Seagull Dukat is updated by an underling who we'll shortly learn is called Damar, except no he's not, because he's been adopted by a patron of the channel and will be known to us as Damar Dawson Biggs, courtesy of Admiral Cameron McGinn. Damar Dawson Biggs tells us the outpost holding our conference has had unexpected visitors. Whoever it was disabled the defences and kaboomed pretty much everything else, including the people, which is bad news for the other Bajorans that were invited and had already arrived. A likely culprit for the kabooming appears in the shape of a Klingon bird of prey. The expected fight doesn't come, though, as we're in a simple freighter that they don't consider a threat. Seagull Dukat takes that personally and, despite Kira arguing against it, has a bit of a poop at them. They give zero fucks about his weak weapons and slowly fly right over us to make it clear how little they care before buggering off. Dukat's pride is wounded, but at least they're all still breathing. He starts talking about calling Central Command to get them to send out a real ship, despite the nearest one being days away. Kira, on the other hand, isn't defeated yet. She advised against attacking a moment ago, sure, but that's because she knows how to pick the right fight. As a former Resistance member, she thinks the right fight is a dirty one. Fighting dirty means keeping a knife up your sleeve, or, in this case, sticking one of those surface weapons from the attacked outpost in our freighter's cargo bay. Dukat isn't sold on the idea, not least of which because he was going to take a cut from the cargo they'll have to dump. Those planetary cannons were also never meant to be used by a ship, but Kira thinks that's just a puzzle to solve. The test fire provides a suitably satisfying kaboom, though it does have the slight downside of setting fire to their ship a little bit. Still, Seagull Dukat's chuffed about having a new toy, and tries it on again with Kira, who tells him to bollocks. She's getting revenge for some dead Bajorans, and any benefit this will have for Dukat's political standing is just an unfortunate side effect for her. Kira's hatred of Dukat isn't affecting how she treats Zial. She's teaching her to shoot, something that might be useful if the current Klingon conflict continues. That doesn't mean she's going to lie to Zial, though, and admit she thinks Dukat's a scumbag. It's a fair position, says Zial. She knows he did some real bad shit during the occupation, though says he believes the whole thing was a mistake from the start. Kira's not convinced, his actions going beyond her ability to forgive, and they go back to training. We're hunting Klingons. The bird of prey that ignored us earlier will still be around, and finding it means figuring out what they'll attack next. Seagull Ducat suspects they know that a nearby outpost is actually a secret weapons facility, prior targets indicating that they have more intelligence than expected. Now all we have to do is get there and look like a tempting target to rob, and presumably hope they don't recognize us from earlier. We do a science to make it look like we're carrying dilithium and hang around waiting to see if Ducat was right about the target. Apparently so, if this decloaking bird of prey is the one from earlier. Damar Dawson Biggs tells us they're giving us a call after a quick scan, and Seagull Ducat's assurance that we're definitely not carrying anything of value convinces them to try and rob us. We wait until they're nice and close before revealing what we're actually carrying, and poop some yellow right at them. Their engines get buggered up by the volley, but sadly their weapons are a little more resilient. Some pooping back makes kabooms on our side, which means a little more dirty fighting is required. This particular boot to the testicles takes the form of Kira and Ducat teleporting over to the bird of prey. A little beeping and booping has the rest of the Cardigan crew teleported over as well, and all of the Klingons stuck on Ducat's old freighter. Not for long, though. Kira asks if killing them was necessary, but has no response when he implies her opinion might have been different when she was still in the Resistance. Damar Dawson Biggs and Zial enter, with each saying weapons and engineering are secure, respectively. That puts Seagull Ducat in full gloat mode. After a little poke around, Kira informs him it's actually better than he thought. This ship's carrying intel on what all of the Klingons in Cardigan space plan to target. Ducat's already spending the glory in his head, saying he'll expect to be promoted to legate again as a result. Off he goes to call the head of the Ditapa Council personally to give them the good news. The news, it seems, was not received quite how he expected. Oh, they gave him his job back as the official military advisor to the Council, but that's all they're doing. The intelligence on Klingon assets in the area is not going to be used, because the Civilian Council wants to find a diplomatic solution. Seagull Ducat is disinclined to agree. He's sick of the weaklings his own people have become. Klingons aren't going to be stopped with words, so he'll do it himself. Others will see his decision and join him, creating a resistance movement that will fight the Klingons in a way this new government won't. He'll need help, though. Someone who's done all this before, someone who's an expert in guerrilla tactics, someone who's used to working with whatever they can find or steal, someone who can unite the scraps and dregs of whoever will join them into a force capable of fighting an oppressor. Someone like Kira. Zial has learned a new trick and wants to show it off to Kira. It doesn't quite go how she expected, and rather than disarm her attacker, Zial ends up on the floor with a knife at her throat. That's fine, though. It's all good training, and she'll need it if she's going to follow her dad. That seems to make Kira's decision for her. Oh, she's not going to join Seagull Ducat. She's been down that road before, and it was shite. But she can help, in a way, by taking Zial to live with her on DS9. She can't stop Ducat from walking this road, but she can spare Zial from having the childhood that Kira had. Sisko's a touch surprised to find a Klingon bird of prey appear outside the station, and even more so to learn there's a Cardigan in the captain's chair, but he lets them dock. Seagull Ducat gives Zial his word that he'll come back for her when it's safe, and he won't even be pointing a weapon at her like the last time he found her. He also lets Kira know that he's delighted they're now bound together despite her hatred of him. Ducat's new ship turns around and buggers off. Odo joins Kira and Zial and is very curious indeed when he's told who our new guest is, so we'll leave Kira to fill him in on the details until the next adventure. And just like that, we try to launder the image of Seagull Ducat. Ducat the freedom fighter, Ducat the moral, Ducat who's willing to sacrifice the soft, comfortable government position he's offered to do what's right for his people, Ducat who'll endure hardship to keep his planet safe, Ducat and his struggle for righteous victory. It's an almost convincing argument, albeit one that ignores an important point. He's evil. Ducat is evil. He oversaw the brutal oppression of an entire species. He would summarily execute people at random to maintain order. He would commit atrocity after atrocity and still believe it was the right thing to do, not only for Cardigans but also for Bajorans as well. He himself has stated exactly this sentiment before, taking credit for the society Bajor has become and saying it was due in no small part to his actions. Because that's the most distressing thing about evil people. They rarely consider themselves to be such. That is why he's so convincing an antagonist, because he thinks he isn't one. He is the sort of person who genuinely believes the only reason anybody would do anything remotely altruistic is for personal reward, and that any decision should be based purely on what you can gain, regardless of the consequences for others. And that knowledge potentially reshapes his choices here. Seagull Dukat is a smart man. He knows that if he follows the diplomatic approach of the Ditapa Council and it doesn't work, the last thing the public will do before the Klingon fleet enters orbit around Cardassia is make sure that he's hanging from a lamppost along with the rest of the Council. Public opinion was already negative towards the Central Command, and a little thing like the fact that he was following the orders of the people that they put in power isn't going to stop them from stringing him up. Retaking his title of military advisor under the conditions he's being offered would make it a poisoned chalice. So there's a strong argument to be made that his actions here are the best bet for him keeping himself alive, whilst also amassing the power he had prior to the Cardigan Revolution. If diplomacy does work, he'll be hailed as a brave, if misguided, defender. Seeing the brutality of Klingon attacks would drive any military man to fight back after all. That's just patriotic. And if diplomacy doesn't work, then he takes on the mantle of Liberator, a title that will likely lead to him having significant influence once it's over. He's just watched Shakar the Resistance fighter become First Minister of Bajor after all, along with certain other developments that he envies. That his actions could potentially save Cardassia is just coincidental. He's not doing it because it's right. He's doing it because he wants to rule over whatever's left. It's a good call on the publicity front, too. Think about the symbolism of him becoming a resistance fighter. It will play well with those who disagreed with the Cardigan presence on Bajor, something easy to spin as admiration for those brave Bajorans who fought occupation. That he was the head of that occupation can be reframed as him following the orders of a corrupt central command, and provided along with whatever evidence he can create to prove he was always against the whole idea. Besides, how could he possibly be the butcher of Bajor when he himself fathered a half-Bajoran daughter? From a public relations point of view, his chosen course of action promotes his image very well. Speaking of Zial, is it possible that Dukat is using her as a means of manipulation, a conduit for passing on propaganda to Kira via a more convincing source? And just because Seagull Dukat doesn't consider himself evil, doesn't mean that he thinks everybody else believes he's a saint. Any mentions of hand-wringing regrets and a tortured conscience would be far more easy to accept coming from her. That it also serves the purpose of convincing Zial that her father was a patriot forced to extremes is just a bonus. Come to think of it, could that manipulation of image also play a part in him being seen publicly with her? By leaning into that relationship, is he placing a long-term bet on how Cardigan society will develop over the coming years? Power moving to the civilian council is an indicator of personal freedoms and independence being more valued, so him choosing to show affection towards a child considered taboo by the old ways may pay off. It's not working right now, of course, as we're still in a state of societal flux, but if there's one thing Seagull Dukat gets, it's how to play the long game. Let's end then with something else that ties into Cardassia still being in a state of flux. Seagull Dukat mentions contacting the Central Command in this one, then reconsiders and chooses the Ditapa Council for something so important. We already knew the Civilian Council had essentially completed a regime change in their society, but we weren't sure how that affected the Central Command. This indicates they're still around, at least in some form, and suggests they're now fully subservient to the new Civilian Council. Quite how much this central command resembles the organisation that was there before is a question to which we're not given an answer, but Ducat's mention of a rising star in the shape of Gul Marat, who's both military and a member of the council, suggests that newcomers feel confident enough about this regime to give it full-throated support. When you factor in the potential vengeance of the people such rising stars will be displacing, that gesture of confidence takes on significant weight. End of episode.
Have you had any ideas for how... Hold up, what's all this shite?
We're outside the timeline now. Standard video editing options aren't available anymore. That means things like the scrolling credit overlay don't work, so I've had to write the patron names in chalk.
Oh, for fuck... What are those gaps up there and to the side?
Those are spaces for the things YouTube adds on the end of a video, otherwise they'll cover some names, and the guy who makes these always feels a bit weird about it when he does that.
Coward, I'd cover the lot. It's their own fault for being associated with this shower of shite. Anyway, have you had any ideas for how we're getting out of here?
Me? I've been busy writing all this out. I had to stick the chalk to my paw with blue tack. This thing has taken me 3 days.
3 days, eh? I bet there were some people watching this and wondering why I've only just noticed what you've been doing at the start of this credit skit.
I'd imagine you were deeply distracted by the state of our predicament and pondering potential solutions.
Yeah, that'll do. Woof.